Hi, I'm Belinda from Plan A, the Great Commission for Every Christian. In this video, I'm going to give a review of sorts of Sam Chan's new book, How to Talk About Jesus Without Being That Guy. Just so you know, I was given this book for free from Sam's publisher and asked to share my opinion on it. My opinion of it is my own, but I am more than happy to recommend this book, and I'll tell you why. It hasn't always been the case. I read Sam's other book on evangelism, Evangelism in a Skeptical World, and this is an excellent book and I learned a lot from it, and I use some of his stuff in my workshops and I recommend it to pastors. But when a pastor asked me if he should recommend this book to his congregation, I actually said no. I've read literally over 50 books on evangelism, and I could think of other books that suited personal evangelism a little bit better. Because this book really covers everything, it's being called a textbook. It contains things that the everyday believer just wouldn't think that they need to know, like how to give a gospel talk. So Sam's taken what the everyday believer needs to know out of this book and put it in this book, which makes this book excellent. Now, I'm going to talk about this through the Plan A framework because that's how I think about everything, really. So Plan A has 5 principles: growing as a disciple of Jesus, knowing others, sowing seeds in conversation, rowing together in partnership, and showing up and depending on Jesus. And what I love about Sam's work is, even though this book is obviously on how to sow seeds in conversation, it's called How to Talk About Jesus, that Sam incorporates the other principles of knowing others and rowing together. And I think that's so important, so I'm really glad for that. So Sam's chapters on how it is that we can get to know others, how we can practice hospitality, are really valuable and helpful. And I love how he doesn't guilt people, but he says, even if you can just buy someone a coffee or make them a cake or invite them to lunch. So he helps people think about the small thing that they can do given their own circumstances. I love how he embraces different ways of speaking about Jesus. Sam's been a promoter of telling stories about Jesus, which is excellent, and I hope more people hear about that. But also how we can share our testimony, how we can ask questions, the importance of listening, which is often neglected in evangelism books. So Sam really is incorporating the tools that people living in a post-Christian secular world will need to have good conversations. So all of that is really helpful. I think something unique to what Sam is doing in terms of books I've read on evangelism is incorporating the principle of rowing together. I rarely see this when I read books on personal evangelism. So I love that the way Sam talks about how our beliefs are formed by our community, and he talks about plausibility structures and merging universes, and that's all really helpful stuff that I've previously learned from Sam. So a couple of observations. There's not really much in there to do with the principle of growing as a disciple of Jesus. It's not really a criticism, just an observation. I think I talk to people about how our lives impact our witness, about how our lives can also create curiosity or beautify the gospel. So that's one of the reasons I have that principle. Anyway, if you're looking for it, I don't think you'll find much of it in this book. And the other one is showing up and depending on Jesus. So Sam does acknowledge, I guess, the whole premise of his book, that the way we share Jesus in a Christian secular culture is changing and it can be difficult, which is great. It's good to acknowledge that, but there's really not a lot in there about prayer or depending on the Holy Spirit, aside from at the very beginning of the book, before he gets to the first chapter. There's a couple of pages that talks about the example of Elijah building an altar and needing God to send the fire, and that in evangelism we do need God to send the fire, but we still need to build the altars. And then the focus of this book is how we go about evangelism from a human point of view, making altars. And that's totally fine, and that is excellent. Maybe he could have included a bit more on what it looks like to pray or depend on the Holy Spirit. But it is a short book and you can't put everything in there. So again, that's not a criticism, just an observation for people who follow along with Plan A, that you'll find loads in there to help you with knowing others, sowing seeds, and rowing together. Not so much on the other two principles. One thing I thought was interesting is Sam actually has a chapter in here about being an unofficial chaplain, and he refers to Warren Crank's book, The Unofficial Chaplain. If you're following along on the Plan A Facebook page, you will know that I just interviewed Warren about his book, The Unofficial Chaplain. And so I got a fairly lengthy interview with Warren, but I broke it up into smaller parts. So you can see what Warren has to say about being a chaplain on my YouTube channel, so look up that. Anyway, this is an excellent book. Sam is a gift to not just the church in Australia, but the worldwide church. I'm thankful for his generosity and his willingness to train others in this and lead the way. And just personally, I don't know Sam very well, but when I first started in this job, I remember one time calling him and asking for his advice on how to give an evangelistic talk, and he was very free and generous with his time, and so I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the way that he's been generous in sharing his life and his knowledge with us through this work. So I think you'll find people enjoy reading this book, and it will be helpful for you and your church.